24 rounds gone, over 200 games played. The purpose? To give us this ranking before the real competition starts in September. It was a tight race with both the battles for the top 4 and the top 8 coming down to the final round of the year. But now we're here and it's all to play for. This is your complete guide to the 2025 NRL Finals. I'll go through team by team, looking at the 17s that I think each team will be able to field during the finals, accounting for suspensions and injuries, and end the video by predicting every single game this final series. Looking at who I think is going to take home Rugby League's ultimate prize. Starting off with a side who snuck into 8th place, we've got my Sydney Roosters. Now I'm going to get one thing straight before all the comments about bias come in. Are we going to win the premiership? No, that is very, very unlikely. But are we a dark horse? Yes, absolutely. The two form sides in this competition, having won 5 of their last 6 games, are the Broncos and the Roosters. The key difference for the Chooks, though, is that they are match fit. The only first-team player unavailable for them is Nat Butcher, and he's been out all season long. That means they've been able to put together a very consistent team for a number of weeks now, so there's very little questions about their selections heading into the finals. The key man for their finals run, as he has been all season long, has to be the one and only James Tedesco. It goes without saying at this point, but after the club lost a metric ton of experience over the last off-season, Tedesco's leadership around young guys like Rob Toya and Hugo Savala has been invaluable. When the Roosters' backs are against the wall in these big finals games against the best teams, it's Teddy's talk that's going to get them out of there. Looking at their 17, Tedesco obviously lines up at fullback with Daniel Tupou and Mark Nwangani Tawase on the wings, forming what I think is arguably the best back 3 in this competition. Billy Smith and rookie sensation Robert Toya will line up in the centers with the yin and yang halves combination of Hugo Savala and Sam Walker. The game plan when it comes to the forwards in recent weeks for the Roosters has been power through the middle, and I do expect to see Spencer Leniu, Lindsay Collins, and Nafahu White starting in that middle rotation. That allows them to carry the slightly smaller Benaya Yowelu for the first 20-odd minutes of the game before Connor Watson comes on and finishes the rest of the match. The back row pairing of Angus Crichton and Victor Radley are very solid, with the remaining 3 bench spots going to Egan Butcher, Blake Steep, and Siwa Wong. There are stronger benches in this final series, but this one is very, very solid. And it's definitely enough to get the Roosters over the line when it counts. In 7th place, we've got the Penrith Panthers. The 4-time premiers were anchored to the bottom of the ladder in round 12 off the back of a 25-8 loss to the eventual Spooners in Newcastle. But their resurgence since then has been nothing short of incredible. They've won 10 of their last 13 games, and that does include the loss where they rested their entire first grade side against the Bulldogs. I do hate to admit it, but Penrith are well and truly back, and they are among the genuine contenders for this year's premiership.
You can't keep getting away with it! You can't keep getting away with it!
As for their key man, I won't waste your time. This side's success hinges on whether Nathan Cleary can carry them to a 5th consecutive title. He's the man who the responsibility falls on, he's the man that they look to in the key moments, and he's the man who the Panthers' premiership tilt depends on. Penrith, like the Chooks, have a pretty much clean bill of health according to NRL.com's casualty ward. They've got no first-team players unavailable, so they'll be able to field a full-strength side, which for them on paper is one of the strongest in this final series. Dylan Edwards lines up at fullback with a wing pairing of the astronomically improved Tom Jenkins and the best winger of this generation, Brian To'o. I have heard some whispers, which I find rather unbelievable, that Paul Alamotti might be favoured over Tom Jenkins due to his finals experience. But this video is being recorded before teams have been named, and I really can't see why they would drop Jenkins after the year that he's had. Isaac Tungo, though a little bit hot and cold, does lock up one centre spot, with Stephen Crichton regen Casey McLean on the other side. Blaze Talangi at 5'8" really struggled to cement his spot, but there's no question that his form at the back end of the year has been good enough to beat the competition's best teams. And of course, his halves partner Nathan Cleary is as much a specialist of this end of the season as anybody. In the front row, I'd have Kiwi Moses Leota lining up next to Kangaroo Lindsay Smith with the legendary Isaiah Yeo at lock. At hooker, the ever-reliable Mitch Kenny, and a back row pairing of the reliable Luke Garner and Origin stalwart Liam Martin. For the bench, the preferred option does seem to be Brad Schneider, so I have put him there, but I personally would be looking to go with maybe a Dane Laurie to provide a bit more spark, cover those backline positions, and back in Mitch Kenny to play the full 80 minutes. And then the other 3 spots really do speak for themselves, with Liam Henry, Scott Sorensen, and Isaiah Papali'i absolutely locked in. Looking at that bench, I mean, that is notably stronger than what most other teams can field, and that really could prove a difference for Penrith around that middle period of games when the starters are off the field. That's a real strength of Penrith, and I can definitely see that carrying them deep into this final series. The first of our sides to have secured a home final, the Wires finished in 6th after being in the top 4 for the vast majority of the season. Aside from my own team, the Warriors are the side that I like to see take out this year's premiership the most. And I think that that's true for the vast majority of fans. But unfortunately for the Wires, as soon as they lost halfback Luke Metcalf and forward Mitch Barnett, I personally wrote them off, and I do think that that's looking like it's coming true. Their other concerning injuries are Rocco Berry and Eddie Eromea Tawaba, who at the time of recording were yet to receive further information about. Jacob Laban, however, is expected to return during this final series, so I've marked him in green. I think that this is a squad that's done really well to fill the leadership void left by Tohu Harris, Sean Johnson, and Adam Neal-Blake, and that's largely been down to their key man, James Fisher-Harris. This is a man who's won the last 4 premierships in dominant style and knows this end of the year like the back of his hand. If these young Wars are to go on an unlikely run, it's going to be the leadership he provides that gets them there. Now, the 17 that the Warriors could put together isn't necessarily bad, but I would say that it's the weakest of these top 8 sides. One thing they do have in abundance, though, is double-barrel surnames. God damn. 5 of those first 8 players have got him. Anyway, the reliable Charles Nicoll-Cookstad starts at fullback with Delamatene Zalesniak and Tane Torpiki on the wings. Normally, I would want to start Roger on the wing, but I do think that they need him to cover the centers in Rocco Berry's absence. So the centers are RTS and Adam Pompey. In the halves, I've got Chanel Harris-Tavita and Tanner Boyd, who, though both solid first graders, I don't see as a combination that is going to consistently beat the best halves pairings in the comp. But then again, that's down to losing Luke Metcalf, and I think the vast majority of teams would really struggle having lost their main halfback. Fisher-Harris and Jackson Ford are the starting props with Aaron Clark at lock, which is a good enough middle trio to at least hold their own, with the crafty Wade Egan coming in at hooker. The bench is where I think the real game changers for the Warriors lie, though. Tomato Martin will provide a solid little bit of energy through the middle at points during the game, but I think the impact that Maratinu Kore, Dimitri Vaimonga, and Leka Halasima will bring throughout the game is massive. It is absolutely the Warriors' greatest strength. I mean, once those guys come on and generate some momentum, allowing the halves to shift the ball out to Roger Tuivasa-Sheck in a little bit of open space, that's when this side will really get going. They're definitely a side that could pull an upset off, maybe even 2, but winning 4 games in a row to get all the way to the grand final, that's going to be a big ask. Moving up to Cronulla, the Sharks finished in 5th place, missing out on the top 4 only on points differential. More so than most other teams here, I would love to know the mental approach that the Sharks are carrying into this year's final series. Coach Craig Fitzgibbon has continued his 100% record of bringing the Sharks into the finals, but his first 2 seasons were mired by this finals hoodoo. Last year, in their 3rd attempt, they did manage to finally break that curse with a win over the Cowboys in Sydney, but threw very little at Penrith the next week to lose 26-6. At the end of the day, I know they got their win, but their finals record under Fitzy is 1 win from 6 games. They're now faced with a home final against a side who knocked them out at this exact same venue in these exact same circumstances 2 years ago. The psychological pressure to avoid going back to the drawing board again would be immense. Now, while I'm pretty vocal about the fact that I think the spotlight on this man is unfair, the fact of the matter is that at the back end of the season, for the Sharks, the spotlight falls purely on one man, and that is Nico Hines. He's been cleared of a hip drop tackle charge and is free to play in week 1, which is something that I reacted to calmly and professionally. But his style against Sam Walker's in week 1 is a brilliant matchup. The tools are there around Nico. This Shark side from 1 to 17 has a heap of consistent quality. He's one of the players that I really want to watch closely in this final series. Speaking of that 17, it's for the most part the exact same as Craig Fitzgibbon has always had at Cronulla. His back 3 of Kennedy, Katoa, and Mulatalo have been together since the dawn of time, and the center pairing of Kale Iro and Jesse Ramian are a real strength, I think, of this side. The halves of Braden Trindle and Nicho Hynes have found a good balance this year, but it's sort of yet to be proven to be successful in a finals context. In the forwards, AFB and Toby Rudolph will likely start the game, with Jesse Colquhoun taking the spot of the injured captain Cam McInnes at lock. The back row of Britton Nickora and Teague Wilton is absolutely good enough to beat anyone on their day, and the bench impact is huge. 4 forwards, Talakai, Hazelton, Hamnonwele and Kolfusi. That's something that gives them a big advantage through the middle if all of those forwards are on their game. It does mean that hooker Blake Brayley will have to play the full 80, but he's done so this entire season without any problems. Time will tell if that game plan can work consistently through the finals. At Cronulla's expense, it was Brisbane who secured the last spot in the top 4, making sure that they get that week 1 lifeline. The season went much the way I thought it would for them. A bit of a slow start while they adapted to Malcolm Maguire's coaching style, but then a really strong back end of the season as the quality that is in this side shone through. The Bronx are in incredible form, and I do think that they are in that bracket of genuine title contenders. The issue for them is that massive injury list. Forward Xavier Willison and Ben Takura are expected back by week 3 of the finals, although to be fair, I don't think Ben Takura does get picked in the side regardless. The interesting one though is Adam Reynolds, who I'm hearing will be fit to play this week, but apparently the Broncos are going to take a cautious approach with the veteran, opting to rest him because the game isn't do or die. Now obviously I don't have the same access to his medical situation as the Broncos do, so I don't know what's best for him, but I would think that the Broncos need him on the field if they're going to get anything out of Canberra in week 1. Their key man, as I said in my end of season predictions a few weeks ago, is Reece Walsh. It rang true on their run home, culminating in an epic performance against the Storm in the final round of the regular season, and I do think it will continue to ring true throughout the finals. If Walsh is on his game, I absolutely fear the Broncos if I'm an opposition fan. If I know Walsh is off his game though, I don't think the Broncos will threaten the other genuine contenders. There is a heap of pressure on the young fullback. With that, their 17 for the finals looks like this. And note that I have included Reynolds and Willison in this because they will be returning throughout the series. Walsh, of course, starts at fullback with a serviceable wing pairing of Jesse Arthurs and Dean Mariner. I do worry for Brisbane a little in terms of combating aerial threats on the wings like Coates and Tupou, but we'll get to that more later. The centers are Staggs and Shibasaki, who are 2 strengths, I think, of this side, with the most experienced halves pairing in the game of Ben Hunt and Adam Reynolds. I'd have Jensen and Haas lining up together in the front row, as I did with their grand final run in 2023, with the brilliant Patrick Carrigan at lock. I'm confident that there isn't a middle 3 in this competition that is objectively better than those 3 guys, while the explosive Ben Takura and Jordan Ricky will slot into the back row. As for the bench, I really like the makeup that Brisbane are able to go with. Billy Walters is a premier number 14, and both Xavier Willison and Kobe Hetherington are able to bring brilliant impact off the bench. That last spot though is interesting. I have gone with Jaden Hunt in there because I think his form has been pretty good when called upon throughout this season, but Ben Tolte, who's a bit of a cult hero, could be an option there as well as I mentioned before, Ben Takura if he does become match fit. Into the top 3 now, and as the boys from Belmore who'll be looking to secure their first premiership in over 20 years. They've been a lightning rod for attention all season, sitting pretty at the top of the ladder for the vast majority of it, and then deciding to make a radical mid-season switch to their spine, dropping Toby Sexton for new recruit Lachlan Galvin, and shifting Reid Marnie to the bench to make way for Bailey Hayward at hooker. They were decisions that seemed geared towards developing for 2026, but I know Dogs fans certainly think that their premiership window is right here, right now. Those 4 names on the injury list do look bad, especially when you consider the hit that their outside backstocks have taken with those injuries, but the good news to the Dogs is that all 4 of those guys are expected to return at some point during these final series. For Montoya, there's been a fair bit of mixed messaging about it, but apparently he could play as early as this week. As could Jacob Carraz, who a few people in the know at the Bulldogs have told me that he could kind of come in any week when needed. Sherry will definitely be back in week 2 with his concussion, and Harry Hayes has been a little bit difficult to find information about. Initial reports had him back around grand final time, so I have gone with that, but I have been hearing whispers that he might even be named this week. For their key man, similarly as with Nicho Hynes, I hate to heap additional pressure on this bloke, but unfortunately it is Lachlan Galvin. I was at the game that they played against the Sharks last week, and their attack was pretty woeful. I mean, granted, they had to shuffle the decks very early on with Sherry going off the field, but it still was well below the par that I would expect from the Doggies. In his first final series, Lachlan Garvin is the man tasked with taking the competition's best defensive team and getting them to put points on the board. The side that he'll have at his disposal throughout the final series, at its best, looks like this. Tracy's got fullback covered, with one of the competition's in-form wingers in Jacob Kraz on one side and Marcelo Montoya returning on the other. Sherry and Crichton in the centres from week 2 onwards is, I reckon, the best centre pairing of any team in this series. In the halves, you've obviously got Burton and Garvin, with Bailey Hayward in at hooker, supported by Reed Marnie coming off the bench. The forward pack at full strength 2 could be very effective, with Max King and Josh Curran starting in the front row, with Jamin Salmon at lock, who has proven to be a very important part of Cameron Serrato's game plan all season long. In the back row, Viliame Kikau and Jacob Preston have proven that they can go toe-to-toe with any back rowers in the Premiership, and on the bench they've got Kurt Mann, Sam Hughes and Sitili Tupouniua. The man who I just can't find a spot for here, and best believe I tried, was Harry Hayes. Now granted, that might not ever be an issue if someone else goes down or they get knocked out before he returns. But who do you drop from this side? I think some would say Jamin Salmon, but he's been their lock for the last 2 months. Tupouniua is really the only other option, but I think he offers too much at his best to be left out of this team. Either way, it's a good headache for the Doggies to have. Into the top 2, and it's the ever-present Melbourne Storm who'll be hosting the Dogs in week 1. They've lost 2 on the bounce, though they have rested certain players across those 2 games. Nonetheless though, last year's grand finalists definitely don't lack finals experience, and the head coach Craig Bellamy knows this time of year as well as anyone. Their 3 unavailabilities are big burdens though, none more so than Jerome Hughes, who is expected to miss the rest of the season. Fullback Ryan Pappenhausen will also miss week 1 due to concussion, though I do expect Suafa Alongo to slot in at the back there without too much drama. With Hughes gone, the responsibility falls squarely on their key man Cameron Munster. He's one of the most successful players in our competition and lives for these pressure moments. I don't know why, but I can't shake the feeling that we might be about to see a generational final series from this man. I'm talking 2017 Michael Morgan Midas touch kind of stuff. I know this is a bold prediction, I'm putting a lot of pressure on him and I might be completely wrong, but I can just see Munster having a massive bearing on how this year's premiership plays out. And he's definitely got the side to do it when they're all pulling in the same direction. The Flying Dutchman Ryan Pappenhausen lines up with Will Warbrick and Xavier Coates at the back, which is as good a back 3 as you could ever ask for. The solid Nick Meaney takes 1 centre spot, while young Jack Howarth is expected to return this week for his first game since round 22. In the halves next to Munster, it is a 2-horse race to fill that 7 jersey between Jonah Pezzett and Tyron Wishart. But I just think that Wishart did such a good job filling in the halves last season and is a bit more proven in those big matches. They'll have Harry Grant back from suspension, serving there at dummy half, with Bronson Garlick coming off the bench. In the forwards, Josh King will line up next to Stefano Utekamanu with Trent Loiero there at lock. And though that's not the most intimidating starting middles that I've ever seen, it's certainly good enough to lay a platform for the Storm. Plus, the back row pairing of Sean Bloor and Elias Akatoa are dominant in their own regard. Supplementing them off the bench will be Alec McDonald, Joe Chan, and the massive Tui Kamikamica adding some punch off the interchange. I look at that side and I think even without Jerome Hughes, they've still got what it takes to scale that mountain. And finally, in first place, it's the minor premiers that no one saw coming in the Canberra Raiders. I think second to the Warriors, this is the finals bandwagon team that a lot of people have jumped on, and rightly so. It's a superstar team rather than a team of superstars, and that's always worth respecting. Outside back injuries to Xavier Savage and Albert Hopewati do hurt a little, but Ricky Stewart's son Jed has done a very good job of filling in on the wings in recent weeks. The other one there is Josh Papali'i, who at the time of writing has reportedly suffered a minor ankle injury at training. It remains to be seen whether he'll play this week, but I do think given his age, he might sit out just week 1. For their key man, while there was a real temptation to go with Joe Tarpany or Jamal Fogarty, I know exactly how those guys are going to perform. So I've gone with Ethan Strange. I mean, I love this kid. I think he's going to be causing problems in the NRL for a decade to come. If he can stand up in key moments for Canberra the way he has done all season, he's going to be a player who makes a real difference in this final series. Looking to their side, I think it'll line up like this. Kyle Weeks will be at fullback with rookie pairing Savelio Tamale and Jed Stewart on the wings. Their centres are the experienced duo of Matt Timoko and Seb Chris with a halves pairing of Ethan Strange and Jamal Fogarty. Tom Starling will start at hooker, supported by the young gun Owen Paddy off the bench. The two props will be Josh Papali'i and Joe Tarpany with Corey Horsburgh at lock, and that trio is definitely scary. Even if Papali'i is out, you can chuck Horsburgh in the front row and Smithies at 13 and really not lose all too much. And in the back row, I'd have Kangaroo Hudson Young lining up with the criminally underrated Zach Hosking. Then looking to the rest of the bench, Smithies, Mariota and Sasangi have all had very good seasons and all bring valuable contributions off the interchange. I really wanted to find a spot for Englishman Matty Nicholson in this side, and I do think he's going to have a brilliant career in Canberra, but I just couldn't ignore what Simi Sasangi has done across multiple positions this year for the Raiders. I love the consistency of quality in this side, and I have high hopes for them in this final series. Now, the time has finally come to predict how I think this final series is going to turn out. Last season, I predicted every single match of the finals correctly, except for the outcome of the grand final. But I've got to say, I was heaps more confident about those predictions than I am about these ones. This could age absolutely terribly, but let's get into it. In the first qualifying final between the Storm and the Dogs, I really do think that this one could be as tight as anything. These two sides played out a brilliant game down there a few weeks ago, and I think this one could be the same. Now, I'm recording this video before teams are named on Tuesday, but I can just see Coates and Warbrick wreaking havoc in this one, especially if Jacob Carraz isn't playing. I do have Melbourne progressing to the prelim, but not confidently. Next up, Wars and Panthers in New Zealand, and I'm sorry Warriors fans, I desperately want you to win this one, but I just can't see it happening. The squad has done very well to reach where they are given all their injuries, but finals experience does count for a lot, and it's something that Penrith have in abundance. For the second elimination final, this is a game that I will be at. I think this is going to be one of the closest games in this final series. If the Nico Hines suspension wasn't revoked, I'd be a lot more confident about this prediction, but I do have my Roosters progressing into week 2. We are bookies' favourites to do so, and our form is just unreal. I'm sort of banking on the fact that the Sharkies' head noise is going to be enough to get them off their game in this one. And rounding out week 1, another game that I'm going to be attending in person, I just can't tip against the Raiders in Canberra. Essentially, their entire squad got a well-earned rest last week, which was a luxury that Brisbane didn't have. And while the Broncos' form is brilliant, I do think that easier wins against Souths, the Knights, and the Cowboys might be inflating their record just a little. Canberra get it done in my book. Moving on to week 2, we have two absolutely filthy matchups. The Dogs take on the Panthers in an elimination game out at Sydney Olympic Park, and I would be very disappointed not to see that joint sold out for this one. It'll be a cracker with both sides coming back from long distance away trips. This is another one that I really have little confidence about, and I might be giving them more credit than they deserve, but I do have the Panthers winning this one. Dogs fans, I know I've done you dirty here tipping against you in two very 50-50 games, but they're against the two most dominant sides in recent finals history. In both of those doggies losses though, I would be going for them, and I would love to be proven wrong. On the other side, my Roosters would take on the Broncos in Brisbane, where we did beat them earlier this year, but that was way back in round 6, so it doesn't really tell us that much. With Reynolds definitely expected to be back for this game, I think the difference could be him and Ben Hunt lining up against the inexperienced duo of Sam Walker and Hugo Savala. I do think that these two sides are matched up pretty well against each other, and that the Roosters wingers of Tupou and Nwangani Tawase will cause a heap of aerial trouble for Arthurs and Mariner. But a packed out Suncorp is a very tough place to come and win a finals game as an away team. That leaves us with Storm versus Broncos and Panthers versus Raiders in the prelim finals. For that first matchup down in Melbourne, I think the Broncos are going to be pretty battered from their game against the Chooks, while the Storm spent the entire week in ice baths. And Brisbane will again have that aerial disadvantage coming up against Coates and Warbrick. In the same way that Suncorp is a tough place to come and win a finals game, you don't tend to see sides heading down to Melbourne and knocking down the Storm in a finals game. Melbourne advanced to the grand final. And on the other side, the rematch of the miracle in Mudgee, Panthers and Raiders in the nation's capital. By that point, you're going to have a Panthers side that is more fatigued than Canberra, but that's not the be-all and end-all. It's uncharted waters for the young Raiders, and the exact opposite is true for Penrith. I tossed and turned over this one, and maybe it's because I can't bring myself to tip another Storm versus Panthers grand final, but I have got the Raiders progressing to their first GF since 2019. GIO Stadium has been a fortress for them all season, only having lost one game there. I do think that we will see a Storm versus Raiders grand final. And now, this was the one that I spent by far the most amount of time on, and I want you all to know I did not take any joy out of the prediction that I made. None at all. I mean, it made me sad, it made me sick, and it made me embarrassed to be an adopted Canberran. Now, you might be thinking, tipping Melbourne to go on and win it all without Jerome Hughes is insane, but I do have a theory. A hunch that if the Storm make the grand final, Jerome Hughes will play. The recovery time for his injury ranges from 4 to 8 weeks, and the grand final will be 5 weeks post-injury. Although every report has had him listed as being out for the rest of the year, I can just see it in my head, playing out Cooper Cronk style. Except the Storm are the team that get the biggies on this occasion. And while I'd obviously give anything to see my Roosters win it, there would be a little part of me if we did thinking, that's not the winner that rugby league needed. I think this year, more so than any year in recent history, there's a real chance of a Raiders or a Bulldogs or a Broncos pulling through. And one of those droughts ending would be the perfect way to cap off a brilliant 2025 NRL season. So there we have it. There is your complete guide to this year's NRL finals. If you did enjoy, please do feel free to subscribe. We're trying to hit 10k by the end of the year, and this video is going to get 10k views, so if you're not subscribed, I will find you. Anyway, I will leave it there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.